Hi, and welcome to lesson number 2 of the Fundamentals of Slovenian Grammar course. So, before we do anything new today, let's review every single thing we covered last time. So, last time we said it's very useful to think when thinking of Slovenian grammar, especially as a beginner when dealing with Slovenian grammar, that it's very useful to think of it in terms of two different worlds. And the two overlapping circles on screen represent these two worlds. So we have the world of nouns on the left and we have the world of verbs on the right. And we said that nouns are words for things and people, basically, and places, and so on. But things and people. And verbs are what those things and people can do. They are words for actions or states. So an example of a noun would be computer or table, or even myself, Bojan. People are nouns. And what I'm doing right now, talking, that would be an example of a verb. And then, but we said that with the world of nouns, it's not just nouns that we have in mind, but two other word types, and those are adjectives and pronouns. And adjectives describe nouns in more detail. So a noun is a house, and then you can have a big house or a small house or a new or an old house. All of those would be examples of adjectives. And we said that pronouns, rather than describing nouns, can replace them altogether. So rather than saying the new house, we can say it. And we said that in order to avoid using this metaphor over and over again, in order to avoid saying the world of nouns, the world of nouns, the world of nouns, that we will be using the term noun-like words. So noun-like words are nouns and words that are similar to nouns. Similar how? Similar in that they share the same grammatical characteristics and that they behave the same according to the rules of grammar. And so these are our two worlds, and this is pretty much what we said last time. Now, what is inside of the circles, those are properties. So gender and case and number are properties that make up the world of nouns, and number and person are the properties that make up the world of verbs. And what we will be doing in today's lesson is the following. So basically, we're dealing with a lot of new terms at once. Chances are you don't know what nominative and genitive and dative and accusative mean and so on, and you might not be, you might not even be 100% confident in knowing the difference between adjective and noun and so on. So there's just a lot going on at once, a lot of new terms. And in today's lesson, we'd like to highlight the fact that not all of the terms are created equal. Or in other words, that they don't all belong to the same category or function on the same level. So basically we have two levels. So all of the terms on screen can be divided into two categories. Now the first is word type, the different types of words. And the words noun, adjective, pronoun, and verb belong to that category. So nouns and adjectives and pronouns and verbs are different word types. And then we have properties. So gender and case and number and person are properties that make up nouns and adjectives and pronouns and verbs. Now, even though these properties have are very, very different, like masculine is very different from the singular, categorically, like the box in which they belong, singular and masculine belong into the same box, that of properties, whereas nouns and adjectives, those are words, those are different word types. So this can really help us remember all of the new terminology. So basically, so far we're dealing with two categories or two levels. And we say so far because in future lessons, we're going to have a total of three categories or three levels. So like we said, the first is types of words, noun, adjective, and so on. And the second is the properties that make up that word, like masculine, singular, and so on. So this is really, really, really useful to consider when learning new terms and can really make learning them easier. So we have words and we have their properties. Now, what's important to understand is that the types of words are inseparable from their properties. The collection of properties is the type of word, basically. So if we use an analogy with humans or people, then there is no person without age and height and weight. Everyone has a certain age, a certain height, a certain weight. And similarly, there is no noun without gender and number and case. It's, for all practical purposes, we can think of it as being exactly the same. So a certain gender and height, weight make up a certain person, and so a certain age, height, and weight make up a certain person, and a certain gender, number, and case form a noun. It's maybe just a different word for the same thing. So if we go back to our diagram now, remember when we said last time that humans or people, or the names of people, as far as the Slovenian language is concerned, are basically just nouns. And so my name, Bojan, is just a noun. And so we don't even have to resort to that analogy with age and height and weight, because my name is a noun. It's part of the Slovenian language. We can describe it with stuff that's already on screen. And so the first question is, well, where does Bojan fit into this diagram? Well, here, because Bojan is a noun, just like John or Sarah or any other given name. And so, because Bojan is a noun, it has to have a certain gender, a certain number, and a certain case. And so, in terms of gender, Bojan is masculine. And that gender has, there is some overlap between biological sex and grammatical gender, but it's not that big. Mostly gender has to do with the ending of a word. So Bojan ends in N. The final letter is an N, which is a consonant, which makes it masculine. And we'll delve into gender, we'll have a deeper dive in gender in future lessons. Now, in terms of number, there's just one of me. It's just one Bojan, which means singular. The singular stands for one of something, the dual is specifically two of something, and the plural is many of something. So if I were speaking on behalf of me and a friend of mine sitting next to me here, then we would be two, that would be the dual. And if I had another person, then we could be the plural, of course. But as I am right now, just Bojan is in the singular, and then we come to case, which is the trickiest one to explain, really. Cases are basically different versions of the same word, much like he is a different version of him in English. That's the shortest explanation. Case is a different version of the same noun-like word. Now we know what noun-like word means, much like him is a different version of he. And so let's have a look at case before we can say what case the word Bojan is in. So, like we said, there are different versions of noun-like words, and the only in brackets means that case has absolutely nothing to do with verbs. No verb has anything to do with this weird category of case. And so, English doesn't have cases. For all practical purposes, it doesn't, but it used to in the past. And the remnants are, it's the difference between I and me, he and him, she and her, and so on. And cases have to do with different contexts, basically sentences. When we say context, we mean sentence. So a word by itself technically does not have a case. It gets a case when we put it in a sentence, because then it plays a certain role in that sentence, and depending on the role it plays, it has to be in a certain version of the word. But that's, we'll explain that into much more detail in future lessons. Don't worry, the point right now is just to get to the nominative, and we'll do that shortly. So in practice, so what are cases in practice? It's the same word, but only slightly different, with the slightly different last letters, and we call last letters endings. So not even foreign given names are spared. So not even names that are not of a Slavic origin are spared. And by that we mean that, for example, the name David, the name itself is David, but if we put it in different contexts, in Slovenian it becomes Davida, Davidu, Davidom, and this might seem very weird or unintuitive coming from English, but that's just pretty much how Slovenian grammar works, and we don't really spare given names. We don't really care that they're given names of people. As far as Slovenian is concerned, they're nouns. Now we get to the nominative case. And the nominative case is the first case. So Slovene has 6 of these versions, and the first one is called the nominative, and each and every one of them has a certain name of its own. And so the nominative, if we break down the name etymologically, means the name case. And if you remember from the last lesson, the words noun and name are etymologically related. They are, for all practical purposes, we can think of them as being the same, or at least they have a common common ancestor. And so nouns equal names, and now we know also that the nominative case is the name case. So we have another word that has to do with names. And so the nominative is the only case that's not a case in practice. So we can think of it as the original and the remaining 5 as different versions of that original, or copies of that original, slightly different copies of that original. And so the nominative is the base form of a noun. That is the simplest form of a noun, and sort of the one we learn first. And when it comes to the names of people, it's even easier to remember because that's someone's actual name. That's why it's called the name case, because it is the version of a name or noun that's actually not a version. It's the person's actual name before we butcher it by putting it in different contexts within Slovenian. So now that we know that, now we can point out. Yeah, first let's point out that, so on screen we have nouns and we have the nominative, and they both come from the word name, and that can really help us remember all of this. Now we can finally describe Bojan, and Bojan is masculine, it's singular, and it is in the nominative case because it's not part of any sentence right now. It doesn't have any role within a sentence or a context. So that's pretty much it for today's lesson. The important thing is to differentiate between word types and properties. So not all of the terms are the same. Some belong sort of to word types, the properties that make them up. And yeah, and we just used my name as an example of these properties. So hopefully it was useful. If it's all a bit too much, don't worry, it'll really become clear. With each lesson, it'll be easier and easier. So thank you for tuning in, and hope to see you in lesson number 3, and good luck with your Slovene studies. Take care.